sum up my teaching on the Kingdom Center. I don't know what we'll be doing in the future. This kind of brings it all together in a way that will hopefully help you understand what we should do as a congregation. How should we react to the knowledge that we inherited a broken model? How should we react when we realize we're just not doing what we're supposed to be doing, but we're doing what we've been trained to do? And go ahead to the first screen, and we'll see if we can get me to coordinate with the overhead. Go ahead one more when you can get there, because we have to coordinate time if we can. Again, that's Albert Einstein and his definition of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Nice Jewish kid. Lived down in the Fort Myers area, actually. And see, if we just keep doing the same thing, believing things are going to change, that's insanity. And having learned that the way we're doing things is not the way it was done in the book of Acts, but rather the way it's been done since Constantine, and expecting things to change for us, it's a little bit crazy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And nobody likes change. Nobody likes change. I don't like change. You don't like change. Everybody's uncomfortable with change. If you've been in this congregation by the decades, you've seen change after change after change. Because as I have said, I believe God is an agent of change, and he's constantly changing me. Therefore, he has to constantly change you, and he has to constantly change this congregation. Because if we're going to behave as a kingdom center, we should have things biblically oriented, which tends to be a challenge. And the concept I came up with, because I've studied how this has been done throughout history, is with I'm going to Luke 5, verse 37. I don't know what's in the overhead again. Yeshua is giving a real clear teaching. No one puts new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the new wine will burst the skins, and it will be spilled out, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins, okay? That's Luke 5, verse 37. Yeah, just wait there, and I'll catch up with you, Joan. Thank you. And here's the problem, and Yeshua spelled it out. You can't put new wine into old wineskins. You destroy the wineskin. If you have new wine, you have to put it into a new wineskin. And our problem is that many people are crying out for God's new wine. Most congregations are calling out for God's new wine. We plead, Lord, we want your power. Lord, we want your glory. We sang it in our praise and worship. You know, let the weight of your glory fall. The biblical word for glory is also the Hebrew word for glory, I should say, is the same word as weight. It's all kind of, and we want that. And we cry out to God, please, we want your power. We seek your face. We sing those songs without an expectation that they mean anything, but I'm telling you that we're crying for new wine, the new wine of God's Spirit. That's basically what we're asking. Lord, send us the new wine of your Spirit into our old wineskin. And in his grace, he does not send us the new wine of his Spirit. Because you can't put new wine in an old wineskin. And so by his grace, he doesn't listen to us. He doesn't respond. We say, send us the new wine of your Spirit. We want your face. We want your glory. We want your power. And he says, I can't. It would destroy you. And so when we're doing it, and we're doing it with purity of intention, but we're saying, where's the new wine? And God is saying, where's the new wineskin? You know, God longs to pour out new wine. He has prophetically said he will pour out new wine, but he can't pour out new wine until he has a fresh wineskin to pour it into. So the key to revival is not an outpouring of the new wine into our congregations. It is us as his people taking on a new wineskin so we can contain the new wine he wants to pour out. And he's given us the job of making the new, fresh wineskin. And a wineskin looked like that. It's a leather bottle holding wine. And see, a new wineskin gives fermenting wine a chance to expand. When you put grape juice and let it ferment, it expands. And so a new wineskin allows the expansion of the new wine. Now, if you have an old wineskin, it's been expanded and it gets hard. And if you put new wine into an old wineskin that's already been expanded as hard, it's going to burst. It's a real simple thing. I should pay attention to my notes. Anyway. When we make a mistake, when we cry out to God for revival, we plead with God to pour out new wine into our old wineskin. We're saying, pour your Spirit into me and change me. And God's saying, change so you can contain my new Spirit. We as a congregation are saying, send us your Spirit and we'll change. And God says, why don't you change so I can pour out my Spirit? Now, throughout history, there's many times where you could see where God was gracious enough to do that. There have been incredible moves of God, even through the body of Messiah in the old wineskin. God just shows up. And throughout history, you see those outpourings of the new wine of God's Spirit. It happens here, and it happens there, and it happens somewhere else. And there are historical times when God has moved. But what happens to those movements? They tend to become denominations or just die, which I include Messianic Judaism in. We've denominationalized and we've defined who we are. And what happens, and you've seen it in modern times. You've seen it in this congregation. God starts to do something, and it's exciting, and then it crashes. It happened in this congregation. It happened in many places, even in the United States. God starts to do something really exciting. I don't care if it's Pensacola. I don't care if it's Ocala. I don't care if it's, where's the one in Canada? Montreal? No. Toronto, thank you. Something exciting starts happening and then it crashes. That's the grace of God. And that's a big part of our problem here. We're just on the verge of the outpouring of the new wine. And the only thing missing is the new wineskin. And what happens? Oh, Lord, pour out your new wine. Pour out, go to the next screen. I think that's the next one. You pour out the new wine, and then the old wineskin just bursts. So it's by God's grace that he starts to pour out his new wine into an old wineskin. But if we don't change, it will ultimately crash because the wineskin can't contain it. And God doesn't want that to happen. So in his grace, he causes the great moves he has started to crash. They just end. They end. And what God wants is for somebody to prepare a new wineskin so that he can pour out a new wine that we can hold. He wants to do that. That is his desire. But new wine must be put into a new wineskin. If we keep doing the same thing we've always done and expect a different change, that's insanity. Nothing's going to change until we change. God will not change us. In his grace, he can show up, but we won't be able to contain it very long. The glory of God is the new wine. His glory, that's the new wine. And only new wineskins can contain the weight of God's glory. And what I want to challenge you is we need to become a new wineskin. Go ahead to the next screen. We need to become a new wineskin. And that's the whole purpose of this series of teachings I have been giving on the kingdom of God, particularly for us because we are a kingdom center. We are certainly not the only kingdom center in the world, and not even the only kingdom center in the United States. There are multiple kingdom centers around. I've mentioned to you Rabbi Alex Yalanga, the Lusaka, Beth Messiah. And Lusaka is a kingdom center. God has given us everything we need to make a new wineskin. He's made it available to us, but of course that takes radical change, and nobody likes change. Ephesians 4, verse 7. I need to put the scriptures in there, and I don't. Chapter 4, verse 7. But to each one of us to each one of us, grace was given in keeping with the measure of Messiah's gift. To each one of us, grace was given in keeping with the measure of Messiah's gift. Verse 8, therefore, it says, when he went up on high, he led captive a troop of captives and gave gifts to his people. He gave gifts to his people. Verse 9, now what does he went up mean except he first went down to the lower regions of the earth? Verse 10, the one who came down is the same one who went up far above in heaven in order to fill all things. He wants to fill all things. So what's his plan and purpose for that? Because we are talking about his kingdom, he is talking about his kingdom administration. It's his kingdom. He has to administrate his kingdom. We are not in a position to take over and make the rules. Go to the next. You have kingdom administration. Thank you, Joan. And here's how it works down in verse 11. He gave some to be emissaries, some as prophets, some as proclaimers of the good mood, some as shepherds and teachers, and their job is, verse 12, to equip the Kedoshim for the work of service, building up the Messiah. This will continue until we all come into unity of the faith, of the knowledge of Ben Elohim, the Son of God, to mature adulthood, to the measure of the stature of Messiah's fullness. We can be filled, all of us together. God isn't interested in filling the rabbi pastor, which is the broken model. God is interested in filling the people of his kingdom, and my job is to equip the people to be able to be filled with his Spirit, to be able to minister, to be able to understand kingdom administration is set in place by the king. And within the kingdom administration, he gave the fivefold ministry that we have been talking about. And as we discussed Wednesday night, that's not everything in the kingdom. You see, God, in his mercy, will not pour out new wine into an old wineskin. And if you want the new wine, you have to see how desperate we are to change. We need a new wineskin. The God-ordained kingdom administration is made up of 5 distinct gifts, which he gives in this particular portion of a letter to the Ephesus congregation. And according to Ephesians 4, these 5 gifts have the common goal. What is the purpose of having these 5 administrative positions within the kingdom? It is to equip God's people for the work of ministry. That's the only reason he puts these 5 in place, is in order to equip God's people for the work of ministry. Not the broken model where the minister does all the ministry. That's where the people do all the ministry. And the people in the 5 positions are working to equip God's people to do the ministry. And the ministry doesn't come from an elevated, decorated stage. It comes through the body of Messiah, because the body of Messiah is the head. He is the king. And if you are willing to help make Beth Messiah become the kingdom center that God intended, if you're willing to be changed, and it's a radical change, because then you have a responsibility and not just me. We need to understand God's 5-fold ministry. And what we're going to do is try to lay this down in a simple way to explain to you how the system of the kingdom works. And so you have God's kingdom administration. And in order I'm just trying to decide the direction I'm supposed to go with this. I think I'm going to wait. Let's just roll through this. Give me another click, if you will, Joan. Another one. You're going to start with the evangelist, because in this list it starts with the evangelist. The next thing you have is a pastor. Go ahead, Joan. After the pastor, you have a prophet. After the prophet, you have a teacher. And then you have the apostle. Now, understand something. I'm not saying an apostle is the apostle. I have an apostolic calling. Rabbi Alex has an apostolic calling. Rabbi Jonathan Bernis has an apostolic calling. These are friends of mine. They have apostolic calling. I'm not the apostle Judah. I happen to be somebody who has an apostolic calling, as is Alex, as is Jonathan. We have apostolic callings. It's just a calling on our life. A teacher has that gift. One of the things I miss most about these services, Dr. Joel, who is a teacher, giving the drosh, because then I get stuck giving it. And if you've noticed, when Dr. Joel gives the drosh, he gives this beautiful teaching because he's a teacher. That's his unique gift. We have Agatha running the prophetic end of this particular ministry. It's not that she is a prophet. She has a prophetic calling on her life. The pastor is a special and unique gift. The greatest pastor in this room is Rabbi Isaac. That's his gift. Then you have the evangelist. Evangelists are quirky. We have a hard time holding on to evangelists because everybody has a hard time holding on to evangelists. Just the reality. Now, what I want to do is touch on each one of these and give you an insight into what does that mean. We'll start with the evangelist. Go ahead and click one more, Joan, because I don't know where it's going. Yes. Okay, now I know where it's going. Evangelist gets people saved. That's what an evangelist does. He gets people, she. They get people saved. Their whole goal in life is to see people get saved. All they're interested in is for people to get saved. And they're so focused, laser focused on that, they'll judge you as being insufficient if you don't have that focus. You got to get people saved. You got to get people saved. You got to get people saved. That's all there is, getting people saved. And I'll tell you something. Evangelists should release the operation of evangelism and miracles, signs, and wonders. And that's something they tend not to think about because they think it's all in the argument and the phraseology. And no. Look at the book of Acts. Look at, they should release miracles, signs, and wonders. As I mentioned when we talked about Patrick, you want to get people's attention, raise people from the dead. That's a great form of evangelism. And then you have pastors. Pastors act as shepherds of God's sheep. Go ahead. Their job is to provide comfort and care and protection. They just have this gift. And they're going to comfort and care and protect. Pastor can also be called a shepherd. It's that unique place, Rabbi Isaac has that here, where he can just take care of people. He's good at that. Now, you understand, even though I have an apostolic calling, I can minister in the pastoral realm, the prophetic realm, in the teacher realm, in the evangelist realm. I could do all that stuff, but that's not my gift. That's something that we can all do. Everybody can evangelize. Everybody can learn to flow with the things of God. That's the prophetic. But we have very unique gifts, which aren't limited to these 5. These are just administrative gifts of God's kingdom. Do you see that? The job of these 5 gifts is to equip everybody else to do the work of the ministry. You don't have to fall into one of these 5 categories because God wants his kingdom to be a kingdom of people who do ministry. Go ahead to the prophet. A prophet reveal God's heart and mind, give vision and direction. That's what a prophet's job is. And again, it's not somebody who is a prophet like Isaiah. This is somebody who is prophetic like Agatha. Her job is to give vision and direction. Give vision and direction. Now, I can see these are a little bit out of line. That's my fault. I just realized they're not in order, but that's all right. Doesn't matter. I can do it anyway. Then you have teachers. Go ahead and click on that. Teachers provide understanding, instruction, training, enabling God's people to grow and fulfill their call. Teacher has to do those things. And that's what they do. And then you have the apostolic place. And the apostolic person's duty is to set things in order so that all the other gifts can operate. The apostolic leader just sets things in order. When I travel around the world in my apostolic role, when I go into anyone else's congregation anywhere in the world, I am under the authority of that congregation, but I am there solely to set things in order. Because unlike here, I always minister in my apostolic calling when I'm called down to South America or over to Africa, or if I do something in Israel. If I'm called to do something, I minister in it. Stuart Winograd is somebody you also know who also has an apostolic calling. But just Stuart came into this congregation in his apostolic calling. His job was to help set things in order. That's all. That's all. Do you understand that? These 5 offices within the kingdom's job is to equip everybody else to do the ministry. And they are equippers. And that's what they are. And so while these 5 positions are working to establish individual believers in their place in ministry, not to the kingdom center, but to the kingdom, which is something we talked about last Wednesday night. What about the people who don't come here because they can't come here, but they're a part of us? Their job is to be doing kingdom work. You don't have to be at this address to do the kingdom work of God. If we only do it here, we're pathetic. And so what happens then, if these 5 offices are working correctly, they will help move the people under them, with them, into a new wineskin. Go ahead to the next screen. A new wineskin. What we need is a new wineskin. A new wineskin. Okay, I talked to like 4 or 5 people. Come on up if I talk to you. And we're going to try to make this simple for you by doing something. I want to start with the evangelist here. Who's the evangelist? Joshua, you're the evangelist. And you? How about you? Teacher, you go here. You're the pastor? You come here. Just stand here and face them. You, prophet, you're on that side. You know what? I'm going to act as the apostle. I didn't get anybody to be the apostle. I'll be the apostle. So I want you to perceive this. And by the way, I didn't choose people by their gifts. I'm choosing people that came in early enough that I could volunteer them to do this. So we have an evangelist, we have a pastor, we have a teacher, and we have a prophetic person. Then you have an apostolic person. Okay? The apostle is going to set things in order. I'm going to encourage the evangelist. And what's the evangelist going to do? Get people saved. But he can't do them by himself, so I need an intercessor. Who wants to be my intercessor? Sylvia, come on up and intercede. Some people just have the job of the calling of an intercessor. So she's going to intercede over our evangelist because our evangelist is going to go out, right? She's going to be interceding so that he can indeed go out and win souls. So he's going to go out and win a soul. Right over there. There's a soul waiting for you. And he wins. And what does he have? He has a baby believer. He has a baby believer. He has reached somebody, which is his job. And he has done something that he is called to do. He has gone out and he has won somebody, but they're baby believers. The problem is he's an evangelist. Evangelists tend to be so focused that he could be excited that he reached somebody, but the excitement wears off, and so he just gets rid of that one and goes out to win somebody else. The pastor, whose job is to care, worries about that and is going to take care of that new believer. And the pastor is going to catch that new believer, is going to comfort that new believer, right? They're going to just encourage them, because the evangelist doesn't love anything more than birthing babies in the kingdom. And he's excited with every new verse, but he's always ready to move on to birth another baby. So he has a distinct gift, a very good, godly gift. But it's not his job to nurture and establish babies in the faith. He's just not good at that. That's why the new believer needs to come under the care of an arrow. Well, click something. Give me next click so I can know what I'm doing. The evangelist, okay, go once more. Passes off one more. I forgot I had that up there. The pastor's just loving on the baby. That's what pastors do. Because the pastor's gift is to provide and nurture and comfort. Because all believers need that. And the problem that we have in the broken models is most congregations, the pastor is the only office. And believe it or not, this is the only scripture that mentions. The only place where pastor is mentioned, it says some were pastors. It's not a major thing, but somebody needs to care for the people. That's why you need a pastor. And so in most congregations, the pastor is trying to comfort and care and protect for their sheep, right? The shepherd caring for the sheep. That's the pastor's job. But often that's what happens. The evangelist wins somebody into the congregation is going to pastor them until the second coming. And the people get stuck year after year sitting in their seats, but there's often very little growth. But God has more for you than that, which is why you need, go to the next one, prophets. So the prophet is going to take the believer. No, you hold on to the baby. Who are you? Teacher. Right. Okay, switch. That's what happens when I don't look at my notes. The prophet's going to come in and talk to the believer and say, God has more for you. You're not supposed to just sit there and be comforted. You have a calling on your life. And the prophet says, you have more to do than sit there and be pastored. And the prophet says, what you need is to lay down a stronger foundation, so he passes you off to the teacher. We go in order. I'm nowhere near my notes. I should. And so now this believer is no longer a baby believer, but has been cared for and loved, but now has a direction. You have a call on your life. You need a teacher to show you how to do what it is that God has called you to, whatever it is. Not everybody's an evangelist. Not everybody's a pastor. Not everybody's a prophet. Not everybody's an apostle. You have jobs. You have to have intercessors. You have to have helps. You have to have comforters. You have to have all these other things within the kingdom. And the teacher is going to teach what the prophet has said God's vision is. See, the prophet has given a word. You are called to be whatever it is you're called to be. Your job is mainly going to be in worship. Your job is mainly going to be in prayer. Your job is mainly being casting out demons, raising the dead. Whatever your main calling is, you need to get specialized. You need a teacher so you can specialize in what God has called you to. And only a prophet can give that vision to somebody to go. And so I'm just still trying to find out where I'm in my notes. And so all this is going on within the kingdom, and it's being overseen by the apostolic leader who is making sure everybody is doing the job they're supposed to be doing, but the training comes from everybody involved. All right? And so I've been watching the development of the new believer, because I saw when the believer got saved by the evangelist, I saw the pastor caring, I saw the prophet speak a word into his life, and I see the teacher laying down a foundation for what they are called to do. And then as the apostolic leader, I come to the new believer, and I say, you're now equipped. You are to go fulfill your calling, and I send the person out to fulfill the calling God has called them to. Now, all that's been done, but what often happens when you launch a new believer into ministry? Next screen. Very often, they crash and burn. Right? They crash and burn. Go on, do this. Okay, I'm ready. Yeah, well, then they hit the world, and they simply collapse. Even though they have been equipped over and over and over again. And so they have crashed and burned, and they're just laid waste out there, because even though they thought they were ready to go, and even though they had a prophetic call and the apostle said, go out, they have crashed and burned. Now they're out there messed up. So who's going to respond to that? The pastor. Go ahead, pastor. Go out and goes back to comfort and caring. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. That's right. Bob says it. You'll do better next time. It's okay that you crashed and burned. It's okay that this kind of stuff happened to you, because this is what happens to everybody. This is what happens to everybody. I can tell you, as somebody who has lost a lot of leaders who thought they'd go out and do their own ministry, because Jonathan Burns is the one who tagged it. I make it look easy. So quite a few people have left the ministry and started their own ministry because it looks easy. And there it is. Boom. Crash and burn. But even people who are trying to fulfill the ministry God actually has on them. Okay? Now this believer has matured somewhat, but needs a little bit more. We need somebody with a gift of helps to come out and help the pastor. Who has a gift of helps? Joanne, you have the gifts of help. Stand up here. The evangelist is still praying. That's what the intercessors are still praying. The evangelists are just trying to get people saved. The gift of helps comes in and tries to help the pastor shore up the new believer who has crashed and burned. All right? Go ahead and go to the next screen if you can find it. All right? And you're going to start the whole thing over. See, the evangelist isn't needed to go rescue a person. The person is a believer. But the pastor is needed. Then you might have somebody with helps. You might have somebody with a gift of comforts. Someone with a gift of hospitality. It depends on how much they were hurt when they tried to step out in ministry. Because it happens to lots and lots of people. And so what you do is simply do the same thing. Goes back to the pastor, goes back to the prophet. It's okay. You still have a calling on your life. You need a little bit more foundation, passing you off to the teacher until the apostle says it's time for you to go out again. Okay? And we'll repeat this as many times as we need to until that believer can function. Thank you. You may be seated. Thanks for all your help. Appreciate it. But what I want you to see, if one of those is missing, there's no way the kingdom can grow the way the kingdom was intended to grow, because we're missing something, which is why there's a difference between a kingdom center and a congregation. Most congregations don't have those 5 people in place. Most of them have a pastor who is sometime an evangelist, who are miserable in their pastoral calling because all they want to do is get people saved. You have some congregations and all they focus on is prophecy because they're being led by a prophet. Do you understand how this works? Sometimes the pastor just loves on you and cares for you and takes care of you and will just meet your needs and will stroke you and make you feel good. And sometimes it's all the congregation ever does. And if an apostle tries to run a congregation, it just doesn't work because the apostle doesn't have what he needs to work with. See, when I go internationally and speak in somebody's congregation, I come from a kingdom center because I am part of what may be missing in their congregation. They often have a pastor, often have a teacher, often have an evangelist, but they don't have somebody to set things in order. So my job in the apostolic role was just to put things in order. And if you don't have those 5 distinct offices in place, and if you read Antioch in the book of Acts, which I taught through you, it's where the one new man came from. Remember, they brought apostle up to Antioch because God was doing something. They needed an apostle to set things in order. And the first thing he found out, we need a teacher, and he sends for Paul to do a teaching. And then they get prophets from Jerusalem to come up and say, okay, it's time for Paul and Timothy to leave. Get direction. See how it all flows together? The kingdom center is in Jerusalem. And so Antioch didn't have everything at first, but by the time Paul leaves, there are apostolic leaders in that congregation because he's saying, oh, you have a call. You can do this. And you do all this, and it all flows together. Click one more because I think it's going to tell you what it does. Okay, there's God's word. Go one more because I got to see where we're going. You have the evangelist. Go one more. Birthing babies. Okay? That's what the evangelist does. Births babies into the kingdom. There are 2 people in this list that will offend you. One is the evangelist. You'll be offended by an evangelist because all they know is you got to get people saved. Get out of my way. And if you're not getting people saved, you're not even in the kingdom. And the other one is the prophet. Because you don't want to hear you have a calling on your life. So if it's functioning properly, you have all 5 in place or available to you, which is why Kingdom Center has to be around so you can draw from them. And the next thing is what's next? Pastor, and go one more, who's going to be there to comfort and nurture the congregation. You need that. You need that. And then you have the prophet, which is next, imparts God's vision. Here's a vision for something you don't know about. We've introduced some things, casting out of demons, speaking in tongues, all kind of things that offends a portion of the congregation. It just does, and it's okay if it does. Because it's not enough to say God has a vision. You have to have a teacher to teach what that implies. That's the teacher. That's next, right? Go one more. Provide understanding. It's not enough to me to say you've got to be prophetic. We have to teach you what prophetic means. It's not enough to say you need to go out and cast out demons and raise the dead. We need you to understand how does this work. Because it has to flow from the flowing of God. Hanavi, the word prophet means one who flows. Do you understand? In Hebrew, the word for prophet is one who flows. It's navi, the flowing. And if you have the apostle, go ahead, click. The apostle just sets things in order. You see, it's okay. We have in this congregation 3 distinct prayer groups which just developed. They just developed. Why? Because not all intercessors have the same calling. And we have a group of prayer people in the prophetic realm who pray prophetically. We have a people who, it's not that they don't pray prophetically, but their job is to pray for this service. And they intercede for the service. Then we have another group who pray on Sunday evenings for one another's needs. They pray for, my upcoming this, my bad knee, my bad this, my struggle here, my struggle there. And you understand, it's not that the people in the prophetic are higher than the people over here. No, those are intercessors that are called to different realms of intercession. And see, in somebody in apostolic calling, I'm comfortable with that. And it's okay if the people that want to pray for one another don't flow comfortably with the prophetic, because the prophetic is like the evangelist. Not always easily understood. And the people who pray for this service can mix with the prophetic, but sometimes it stretches them a little bit because that's not where they're comfortable. That doesn't mean they can't do it. It's not as comfortable as what they do. You need somebody in an apostolic calling to set those particular things in order. Now, where all this is operating properly, it forms a fresh wineskin that will hold God's new wine. Because I said all these offices are to, Ephesians 4:12, to equip the kedoshim, the separated ones, for the work of his service, for building up the body of Messiah. Verse 13. This will continue until we all come into unity of faith and knowledge of Ben Elohim, to mature adulthood and measure of stature of God's fullness. We all have to become full of Messiah, not just the pastor. We all have to become full of Messiah. Verse 14, as a result, we're no longer like children, tossed about by the waves and blown over every wind of teaching, by trickery of men and cunning deceitful scheming. In other words, we're not being pulled around by what we hear, what we see online, who we listen to. You get pulled here, you got pulled there, you get pulled there. Don't be children. Verse 15 says, speaking truth in love, we are to grow up in all ways into Messiah Yeshua. Verse 16, from him the whole body is fitted and held together by every supporting ligament. The proper working of each individual part produces the body's growth and for building itself up in love. This congregation will never grow until we are equipped to build God's kingdom. Where the wineskin is complete, we will experience the measure and stature. Is there another screen? Yeah, to Messiah's fullness. To Messiah's fullness. What is Messiah's fullness? Filled with his love and compassion, his character, his holiness, his righteousness and mercy, his wisdom and his power. So we want all those things without becoming a new wineskin. If you become a new wineskin, you are filled with Messiah's fullness, which means you are filled with his love and compassion, his character and holiness, his righteousness and mercy, his wisdom and his power. John 14:12, amen, I tell you, he who puts his trust in me, the works I do, he will do, and greater works he will do, because I'm going to the Father. Messiah's fullness is the new wine. Messiah's fullness is the new wine. I truly believe, if Beth Messiah would accept the fresh new wineskin, God will pour out his new wine. The problem is, the congregation we're used to doesn't look like this. Go ahead to the next screen. It doesn't look like this. That's not the model we're used to. It looks more like this. Go to the next screen. It looks like this. The pastor's doing all the work and nothing's happening. It's nothing. And there are many congregations that look like this. They got this pastor. But you know what? People are flowing out as quick as they're flowing in. And if they grow for a while because of the anointing of the pastor, ultimately they will leave and go somewhere else. Go to the next screen because I don't know where we're going. You have the congregation. And what's the congregation? It's a layman without knowledge. Your job is to sit there and let me teach you. In 10 years from now, you should be sitting there and I'll still be teaching you. And you know, that happens in too many congregations. Here's what I want you to do. Attend every week. Oh, I have it up there. Go ahead, keep going. Worship God. Give money. Read the Bible. And try to live moral lives. All right? I'm going to tell you that because that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. But most people were never taught to heal, to prophesy, to cast out demons, and to do ministry. That doesn't happen. You need to do is go out there and cast out demons. You need to go out there and heal people. Speak prophetically into their lives. You need to go out there and minister. So you have the congregation like that, and then you have next screen, I think, is the leader, the rabbi, or the pastor. And his job, go ahead and put up the next thing. Click one more. He takes care of the layman. Does whatever ministry takes place. And we have assumed that this is the correct model of a congregation. We have assumed that's the way it's done. Go to the next slide, because I think you have the pastoral model in a Messianic congregation. You have the rabbi here, the congregation down there. I'm doing the ministry. You give money, try to live moral lives. That's your job. I do the ministry. And you know what? That's been the model for 1,500 years. Hard to change that because for 1,500 years, that has been the model. Unfortunately, it's an old wineskin, and it simply does not work. It does not work. I'm running out of time, so I want to run through some things. Go to the next screen. Let's talk about the United States. Go ahead and click on it. It is assumed there are 190 million unsaved people in the United States. Okay? There are 15 million Christians who don't attend anything. They stay home, but they're believers. But they're sick of the people of the congregation. They're sick of the leader. They're going to stay home and be a believer. 5% of salvations leave after 1 year. You get somebody saved and they're excited. A year later, they're gone. Which means if you start with 3,000 in the book of Acts, which you start with, if they had set up this model, after 1 year, you'd be down to 150 again. Remember, you started with 150. And you immediately one day grow to 3,000. And if you keep the broken model, by the end of the year, you'd be back to the 150 again. Do I have anything about the Jewish community? No, I don't. 90% of the Jewish people of the United States don't go to shul. 90%. They don't go anywhere. In Sarasota, the number's probably higher than that. They just don't go anywhere. They don't go anywhere. Go back one. I just want to see. Can you go back one, Joan, so I can see what was there? Nah, I didn't put it there. I should. Do you understand? If they had this model in the book of Acts, nothing would have happened. The average congregation in the United States is less than 100 people, and that's decreasing. The average congregation, you take all the congregations in the United States, the average is less than 100, and it's rapidly decreasing, where you don't have 100 people. 75% of all rabbis and pastors admit they're burned out doing all the ministry. Because the pastoral model does not work. It just doesn't work. It is destroying pastors. And so go ahead and next one. You have this broken model of the pastor, rabbi over the congregation. It doesn't work. It frustrates the congregation. It burns out the rabbi pastor. And it's hard to fit the Bible into the old wineskin. Go one more. You try to jam that into the wineskin where you have the fivefold ministry. And in that realm, see, it doesn't quite fit into the wineskin. Go one more because I'm running out of time. You want every member to minister. It won't work in the old wineskin, but it'll work in the new one. And what do you get? It doesn't fit. You can't do that in the old wineskin. You simply cannot. You see, we need to have our minds renewed. That's the pastoral model. It just doesn't work. Romans 12:3 says 12:2. 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and perfect and acceptable and perfect. And so you have this pastoral model, which all of us grew up with. I don't care if you're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim for that matter. You grew up with this kind of a model. That's needs-oriented. I'm the pastor. I'm going to try to take care of your needs. I'll set up committees to take care of your needs. We'll have whole committees that are taking care of the needs. The biblical model, the next one, is you have this wineskin where you have all five. You see, you have to reorient that stuff because it's good that the pastor, rabbi, tries to meet the needs of the congregation. But in the fivefold ministry, it's vision-oriented. Not needs-oriented, vision-oriented. Instead of let's get committees together to take care of the needs of the congregation, let's get committees together to further the vision of the congregation. Do you see the difference? And see, that's the biblical model. Let's talk about the vision we have for you, not the needs that you have. Now, it's okay to help one another with the needs. There are real needs in this congregation. But if I'm not imparting a vision to you as a part of this congregation, I'm not furthering the kingdom. You see, we want to go be... you need a division. You need to know there's a destiny for you. Not a destiny for the congregation, a destiny for you. Not a future for Beth Messiah, a future for you. This is just a place of equipping. This is not the end of God's kingdom. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know what plans I have in mind for you, declares Adonai, plans for shalom and calamity, to give you future and a hope. You see, God created each one of you for a unique purpose. And until that purpose is fulfilled, you will never find fulfillment. I have the privilege of the stage being anchored by two of my grandchildren. And, you know, we don't want to mix things up. Next week, Joshua, you can play the sax. Isaiah, you can play drums. You know, that would work real smooth, right? And we'll let Joanne lead. Do you understand? You got to put people where the God has called them. Although our sax is a renowned sax player, I can't say, well, you're such a good musician, I'm going to put you on the keyboard next week. No. Until you are in that place of your unique purpose, you will never find fulfillment. You'll never truly feel like you are fulfilled. Because almost everybody leaves congregations because they're just not getting fed anymore. They've heard everything the pastor rabbi has to say because they've been with him 2 or 3 years. It's like time to move on. And you get somewhere and say, oh, this is me. I love this. I love this. Then you learn that I'm just saying something and you get comfortable with it. Now it's time to move on. From here, you usually go start your own work because you can't go anywhere else. And I know nobody's comfortable with this direction, yet I want you to try. I want you to try. I want you to think about this. It's messy. The Holy Spirit is messy. I'll probably go ahead and go to Corinthians, and we'll talk about messy, because Corinthians is about being messy. And I want you to support me. Let's keep moving forward with this. Let's keep move forward with this, which means you got to be willing to step up and minister. And we'll end with that. I'll dismiss you with the Aaronic benediction. I said there's no oneg today. There won't be oneg until we... The reason there's no oneg is because there's no floor out there. It's just a dusty floor. And everything's shoved to one side so we can strip everything off of it.